Basically, the Sixth Sense project is about trying to harness the power of social networks and trying to enable people to have much better visibility of people in their immediate locality who are part of their social network, so that they can actually potentially collaborate a bit more in their day-to-day activities. So, in the tourism context, the Sixth Sense project has been particularly looking at campsite communities because a campsite has a lot of people staying in one location, and those visitors tend to be undertaking very similar things. So they'll go to the beach, they'll go to the major visitor attractions in the area, and actually our research has shown that many people are travelling at the same times of day as well. So there's a lot of cars going out making similar trips, a lot with empty capacity in them. So what we've been doing within the Sixth Sense project is we've developed a smartphone app. The one for the campsite is called Sixth Sense Campsite. And what the app does is we ask people from a campsite community to join a social network which is centred just around that campsite, not other campsites and not other tourists, just that one location. So that gives a level of security. As people use the app, it begins to track the movements of people within the community, not individuals, but actually the collective movements of the whole campsite. So you can never identify when one individual is somewhere, but you can actually begin to see the rhythms and flows of the campsite on a day-to-day basis. And users can look at a map and they can slide forward and backwards in time and get an idea of where people are likely to be. Obviously when they're travelling backwards in time, they see where people have been previously, but we can also enable people to slide forward in time. And what we've done is we do this on the basis of looking at historic patterns and then mapping those historic patterns back to people. And we found that within a very short time period you begin to see very similar patterns emerge from the campsite, with people tending to leave at the same time, come back at the same time in the evening. So this is Tomsfield Campsite. They're the wonderful campsite that have allowed us to conduct the Sixth Sense Transport project. It's a campsite with about 100 pitches. It's in Dorset at a place called Langton Travers, which is about 3 miles outside of Swanage. It's on the Jurassic coastline. The campsite has long been very keen to try to promote and develop sustainable tourism, and they do things like lots of recycling. They grow lots of wildflowers on the around the campsite, and they have schemes to use solar energy. Then within the app we have a messaging system whereby people can post different kinds of messages to try to enable collaboration. So for instance, one scenario, a typical scenario, particularly in rural tourism where you have a lot of campsites that aren't necessarily near to towns, is people often need items of shopping, and particularly people often return from a day out and realise they've forgotten something quite critical for that evening. Now in a typical scenario that might mean people have to travel 6 miles to the nearest shop, which is usually undertaken by car. So one way to avoid that kind of trip would be for a user to actually post a message onto a location where they know there's a shop. That message stays on that location, and any other user from that social network, that campsite community, who walks into the vicinity of that location, they will actually receive a message on their phone to say that there's a message from another user from the campsite asking for some form of help. And users can choose whether they want to accept that request or not. So if a user is in a hurry, they don't want to do it, then no obligation to do something, but otherwise a user can, if they're doing their shopping, can pick up an item for someone, and then on arrival at the campsite can hand over the item and obviously deal with any financial exchange that's necessary there. So the idea behind that is to avoid a car trip. A further scenario is related to lift sharing, where quite common in rural tourism, people wish to do walks, and sometimes, particularly where there's a group where there's maybe 2 cars, typical scenarios, people often drive out in the morning with 2 cars to leave 1 car at the end of a walk. So, one opportunity there is that people can post a message on the app on the campsite to actually say they're looking for lifts to particular places, and based on their understanding of the patterns and the movement patterns of other visitors, they get a good idea that visitors are likely to be going to a particular beach or a particular attraction, so they know people are likely to go to these places by looking at these maps that they're able to access.
Okay, so I'd like to go to Swanage, but I'm here without a car, so I'm going to try and use the app to see if I can get a lift off someone. So I need to click on to Tom's Field, our current location, add a message, and say I'm going to Swanage, and see if someone will come and pick me up. I'm going to put that down as a lift request and edit the time, and then write a little message to them. And just press add and see what happens.
A third scenario is obviously visitors often don't understand some of the travel issues around the area. Often people aren't that aware of how far away particular attractions are, and typically people pick up information, tourist information about attractions that can be many miles away, and actually often miss out on good things to do which are very nearby and require no travel whatsoever. So one of the other things about the messaging is people can actually post general messages or even just location messages to alert people to interesting things to do and places to visit in the nearby area. And also the reversal of that is people new to the area can actually put in requests of things to do. So particularly in campsite tourism, when the weather's very variable, people might know very well what to do on when it's a very hot sunny day because they're probably going to go to the beach, but when it rains or it's cold or windy, people are often interested in suggestions of where they might go, and this is where again the social network begins to build up local knowledge.